Does anyone not have this overview of the Gospel of Luke? Oh, we've had them up here for weeks, but I keep getting to ask about it. too. This comes from the Bible Project. The three left, right over it. We share.
Guys have drawn out, talking about.
Yeah, if you look up, go to Bible Project, you can watch the whole video. We watched the video together here of chapters 1 through 9, I think is what they did. Where'd Brian go? That needs to be plugged in. I'm not sure what it is, but
It's a mouse.
oh, it's the mouse. Okay,
Driving.
all right. I can always use this, I think. All right, Luke chapter 1. Just a quick overview of what we've covered so far. It's we talked about the reliability of Luke as an historian. We looked at then the beginning of the narrative where a priest by lot was designated to go in and offer the incense offering in the temple, which is done twice a day. His name is Zachariah or Zacharias. And while he was there at the altar of incense, an angel appeared to him and told him that even in his old age, he was going to have a son who was going to be connected with the answer to prayer that the Messiah would come, that the kingdom would be reestablished. And so as we look to this next passage, beginning with verse 26, Luke is going to introduce us not only to excuse me, what happens next, but he's going to begin doing something that we only find in the Gospel of Luke, and that is he begins pairing the experiences of men and women. One of the emphases of the Gospel of Luke is Jesus' ministry to and from women. And so we're going to be looking for that as we proceed. The purpose of that is to, first of all, promote a previously unknown equality between the genders. And in addition, Luke focuses on the unique offerings of what in that society was considered lowly individuals. He emphasizes their barrenness, their widowhood, their spiritual or actual neediness, and service to the poor. The first pairing we come to is in the context of birth announcements, where the contrasts not only include male and female, but the character of the ones to be born. The first that was announced would be the last of the great prophets of the old law, and the second as the one who would bring about a new law. And watch for other contrasts as we proceed. We'll try to bring them up, and you, if you notice something, you can bring it up as well. All right, so in verses 26 to 38, this section is where Gabriel appears to Mary and announces the virgin birth of Jesus. Verse 26. Now in the sixth month of what? Of the year? Is it of the Hebrew calendar? Is that now? This is where, if we had read the entire passage before, you would probably jump right on it, because contextually, 6 month of.
This, Mike, I got a notation here. It says 6 months. 6 months of Elizabeth's pregnancy.
Yeah, because we just talked about Elizabeth's pregnancy. So in the 6th month of her pregnancy. Now remember what it had said about her pregnancy before related to time. Look back a verse or two. She hid for 5 months. And so in the 6th month, what would be true?
Noticeably pregnant.
Yes, and public about it. So she remained private until the 6th month. So at that time, at the time when Elizabeth is noticeably pregnant, I like the way Frank put that, and also public, is when the angel Gabriel comes back. Now, keep in mind, angel Gabriel, when's the last time that that we know of appeared on the earth prior to his coming to Zechariah? Daniel, which is, I forget how many, like 600 years, something like that. So, Gabriel's just been hanging around for 600 years. Now he's got 2 assignments just like that. Here he is. It says the angel Gabriel was sent from God to a city in Galilee called Nazareth. Now, I want us to consider a little bit about Nazareth. You can see it on the map here. There's an arrow pointing to its location. First of all, we're told in the text that it's in Galilee. Before I go on, I want to mention something more about Gabriel. Let's see, did I already talk about that? When Gabriel did last appear before this to Daniel, if you look at back at Daniel 9, you'll see that it's in the context of the revelation given to Daniel concerning the 69 weeks, which is the time frame that God gave for when the Messiah would come. 69 weeks or 69 sevens or 483 years after the decree to rebuild the temple in Jerusalem. Now that occurred after the time of Daniel even, but from the time that the decree was given to rebuild the temple in Jerusalem, Gabriel explains to Daniel that 483 years later, that's when the Messiah is going to come. And so here we are. And so those that were cognizant of those features in Daniel were watching. And we'll come across a couple people later on that were expectant of the Messiah. And so Gabriel was involved with the announcement in Daniel of the coming of Messiah, when it would be, and now he's here announcing the actual coming around 600 years later.
So
Yeah.
96 weeks, that's not like our Monday through Friday.
No, a week. See, in it all, we're used to what we call Arabic numerals, which they got from India, I think. 1, 2, 3. But every ancient culture did not. No ancient culture had numbers. They used letters for numbers. And so when they talked about a week, it's literally a 7. So they would say, instead of saying see you next week, they would say see you next 7. They would use the number for the letters for that. So when Daniel is given the revelation about 69 weeks, it's literally 69 sevens. Now, that would normally be interpreted as weeks, but in the interpretation given to Daniel, those weeks stand for years, not days. And if you add up the 7 times 69 to get the number of years, it comes out to 483. And if you go to the year that the decree was given by Artaxerxes to go rebuild the temple and take that forward, it comes to the time of Christ. That would be a whole different study.
Yeah. I actually we did a Daniel study, so I know what's in there. So
Yeah. Okay, now Galilee. Galilee was a designation given by the Romans to one of the 4 political divisions of what they call Palestine. It comprised the tribes of Zebulun, Naphtali, and Asher, the most northern tribes. This was an area that was highly populated by Gentiles. And those who lived in Judea looked down on people from Galilee. They looked upon them with much disdain. They were the country bumpkins of their time. And you can see this in the Gospels, this looking down the nose at Galilee. Now, Nazareth, this basically, it says a city of Nazareth, but that's kind of an overestimation of its size. It was basically a rural village at the time probably had a population of no more than 400. Can you think of a town of 400? I don't know. Any of you ever lived in a town of 400? I did. Actually, the town I grew up in had 600, so it was a thriving metropolis compared to Nazareth. So small village in a very insignificant place in Israel. And Nazareth, it took about 3 days to get from Nazareth to Jerusalem. You look on a map and say, wow, that's a long ways to go in 3 days. But remember, when we look at a map of Israel, we think, it's a big area because we're looking at a large map. But Israel is not all that big. It's about the size of New Jersey. So a 3 days walk is what it took to get from Nazareth to Jerusalem. But one thing important about Nazareth, and you may note, and the reason I picked this map is because it shows the highways. It is on the intersection of several great caravan trade routes. You see those lines going, both the red and the yellow. I won't go into the difference between them, but you can see several of them cross Nazareth. So a lot of trade was going through there, which is a lot more Gentile activity. And in addition, there was a Roman garrison nearby. So Nazareth is a Jewish community, but a lot of Gentile influence. All right. Any questions about that part of the narrative? All right, verse 27, we see to whom Gabriel is coming. He says he's coming to a virgin engaged to a man whose name was Joseph, of the descendants of David, or the house of David. The controversial word in this verse is the word virgin. Though it seems that those who want to discredit the Bible or not want to believe that the Bible is true in all its aspects, one of the things they deny is the virgin birth. Back in at the turn of the 20th century, when German rationalism had made its way over to America in the form of what was called modernism, or we call liberalism today, one of the tenets of the faith that was denied by many Christian professors, and by that I mean university professors and seminary professors and pastors, was the virgin birth, because they usually those who deny aspects of the Bible, they deny the miracles. They don't want to believe that in the supernatural, and so they say virgin birth is impossible. Therefore, we don't believe that it actually happened. It's just a story that developed, and so it became one of the fundamentals of the faith that was settled on by those who reacted against the modernist movement. And one of the books that was written by G. Gresham Machen, if I remember correctly, was The Virgin Birth of Christ. That was, if you deny that, then really you deny the gospel, you deny everything. And so the fact that she was a virgin is important. Now, what many of them do, and you may hear people talk about this, and that's why I bring it up, is they go back to Isaiah 7:14, which is the prediction of the virgin birth. Matthew tells us more about that. Luke doesn't bring up that passage, but he does use the language from it here. And the Hebrew word translated virgin in most of our translations in Isaiah 7:14, the Hebrew word alma, can be translated a young maiden or a young lady, not necessarily a virgin. A person could be a young lady and not be a virgin. And so they make a great deal out of that and say, see, the prediction was that she would just be a young lady. Well, I won't get into all the ramifications of that or their misunderstanding or misapplication of the Hebrew word alma. Yeah, it can be translated that way. But when we look at how Matthew and here Luke uses the Greek word, it is not the Greek word for a young woman. It is the Greek word for a virgin. And it can't be translated any other way. It is a virgin. And that's how the Septuagint translated the Hebrew word alma, was through this Greek word Parthenos. It is not ambiguous. It is direct and it is certain. All right, so any questions about that? That was maybe a little rabbit trail you didn't necessarily want to go on, but I thought it would be important to bring it up. So the word here is virgin, can't mean anything else. It says that she was engaged to a man. The different words are translated as man. This is the word aner, which usually has the idea of a husband. So she's basically engaged to a husband, her husband. What does it mean to be engaged? Some of your translations might have betrothed. It's using the word engaged is to try to bring it to more modern language, but maybe we lose some of the idea because in our culture today, to be engaged has the idea of a promise, but a promise relatively easily broken, right? And we hear people breaking their engagement, things like that. In that culture, this idea of betrothment or engagement, and by the way, the verb here is a perfect passive participle, which simply means that the idea of betrothment was something that had been entered into at a point and then continued on. So the state of being betrothed was something that continued on. And it was the first state of marriage in the Jewish culture. Usually lasted about a year before the wedding night. Betrothal was more legal than our contemporary engagement. In the Jewish culture of the first century, this was legally binding. So once you enter betrothment, you were legally bound to one another. It was not like, okay, I'm gonna throw the ring at you and I'm gone. It was a legal deal and could only be broken by two things: divorce or death. So not so easy to get out of. When did girls become marriageable in that culture? Any guesses? Good guess. Any of you know what a bat mitzvah is?
Like bar mitzvah only for girls.
Yeah.
Girls.
And
So 12?
at 12. So at 12, she was considered a woman as she's gone through the bat mitzvah. And at that point, she becomes marriageable. And then there will be a year betrothal period after that. During that betrothal period, the couple was considered married, although without sexual relations. Although I did read someplace that sexual relations could take place. Maybe that's why Luke is so clear about that not being the case here. If the woman became unfaithful, she could be stoned. And divorce or death were the only options to break it. Spiros Zodhiates is a well-known Greek scholar. He kind of came by it easy because he is Greek. And so his study of the Greek language was something that was kind of second nature. Although the Koine Greek of the New Testament is a little different than the modern Greek. But he had some informative things to say about this betrothal, which in the Greek is menestuo. He said it's related to the verb used for remember, because it's a ceremony which was to be remembered when a person was espoused or committed to another for marriage. The betrothal ceremony perpetuated in a conventional fashion the recollection of the time when a woman was purchased from her family. When a woman was designated by the head of her family as the future wife of another man, the prospective bridegroom paid a certain sum of money or service, as in the case of Jacob, you remember. A contract which was inviolable was then entered into. Until the time of the actual marriage, the bride-to-be remained in her own family. It was not permissible to betroth her to any other man except by action amounting to divorce. And any violation of the rights established by the betrothal was as serious as if the two persons had been ceremonially married. And so he talks more about the Old Testament, when the ceremony would take place and so on. So usually it was a money payment that was made. And so it was even though maybe there was not a document on paper drawn up, it was in essence, orally at least, a legal document. No consent of the girl was demanded. And he says, nor do we know of the recognition of any legal age of consent, unless, as in somewhat later times, it was not expected that boys would marry before the age of 18 or girls before 12. The ceremony involved the following acts. First, a contract drawn up by the parents or by the friend of the bridegroom. Secondly, the meeting of the two families with other witnesses, at which time the groom gave the bride jewelry and declared his intention to observe the terms of the contract already arranged. Now, you'll notice that there's little to be said here of love or, that kind of a commitment. It's a contract. It's a legal agreement together. Third, the payment of the mohar, which was the price paid for a wife to her parents by the prospective bridegroom, and a priest may have been present when that was done. The status of the man and woman was practically the same as that of married persons, although the wedding ceremony proper will be celebrated at a later date. And we have Jesus talking about this too. Remember the parable of the 10 virgins? The bridegroom they didn't know when he was going to come to get his bride. That's because generally during the time of betrothal, the bridegroom would go back to his father's house and either build on an addition or build a building for he and his wife to live. And when he finished, he would come and get the bride. And they had already been betrothed, but now he's taking her to his home and they'll consummate the ceremony there, the wedding there, the marriage. Okay, so let's go to the next important word here is descendants. It says that the virgin was engaged to a man whose name was Joseph, of the descendants of David. Now, I've gone back and forth on this because when you see descendants, you want, okay, of whom? Who's it talking about? Is it about Joseph or Mary? Well, grammatically speaking, the word order would favor connecting Davidic descent to Joseph, not Mary. Although the word could refer to either of them, most commentators do connect it with Joseph. And so I have to say that grammatically, it does look like he's saying descendants, the descendants of David are talking about Joseph. But I kind of think also that the emphasis here in this passage is on Mary. So maybe Luke does have in mind Mary, as he is going to demonstrate later when he goes through the genealogy. So I'm a little bit up in the air about it. I guess I'd have to say grammatically it does look like he's talking about Joseph. And both were true. Both Mary and Joseph were descendants of David, and we'll talk about that later. Then he says that the virgin's name was Mary. Anybody know the Hebrew for Mary? In Greek, it's Mara, which is the Hebrew word for bitter. You might remember that from study of Ruth. Anybody know what the Hebrew word for Mary would be?
Is it Miriam?
Yeah. Who's a famous person with that name? Moses' sister. Yeah. So what was that?
You're such
I'm
a
just
dork.
being duped.
He said Webster.
Merriam-Webster.
Never would have thought of that in a million years.
It takes a strange
You're
mom.
welcome.
Let's look at the dictionary a lot.
Probably 25.
All right, so her Hebrew name is Miriam or Miriam, and throughout the book of Luke, he refers to her by that name, in Greek, Mariam. Now, Gabriel appeared to Zechariah to announce the birth of Jesus, or announce the birth of John. So why didn't he appear to Joseph to announce the birth of Jesus? You understand the question?
Marcia says to get Mary on board first.
What was the question, Joe? I'm sorry.
Well, he appeared to Zechariah to announce the birth of John to the male. Why does he appear to female Mary to announce the birth of Jesus?
Because when he did it to Zacharias, he was gonna be the father.
Yeah.
Where with Mary, Joseph is not the father.
Okay, so a good point is that Joseph would not be the natural father.
It's an issue of faith.
Explain.
Well, in Zachariah's case, this is right well beyond years and seems impossible. Right? So, it required faith for them to, I think, believe that the Lord would do what he said. And then, in the situation with Joseph and Mary, I mean, if he knows her like relationally, not physically, but her character, it's maybe a test for Joseph to see how he would treat her in that situation, etc. So, right, later we find out he's going to quietly divorce her. He's not going to make a public spectacle of her,
Mhm.
etc. And so, I mean, the Lord already knows this of him, so it's not like he's proving himself to the Lord, but he's kind of proving himself to himself, if that makes sense.
So Gabriel should have appeared to Joseph first.
Well, God didn't let it happen that way, so no. Right, and so I don't know, maybe for us to see that, he was a man of good character. They already, right, the Bible already says that of him, but now he proves it in his actions. He's not hostile towards her, he's not.
Okay, you're saying good things
demeaning.
about Joseph, but why did the Gabriel appear to Mary and not Joseph?
Oh, I'm sorry, I misunderstood your question. So I would say that, I mean, it's her body.
Yeah, okay, yeah, and kind of, that's what it comes down to.
Building off what you're saying, though, it's who I think, in my just opinion, who found favor with God.
Yeah.
Zechariah he was doing his duties of lighting. I mean, he was inside this was his once in a lifetime chance of lighting whatever, correct?
The incense, yeah.
And that's when he is approached and met with this angel. And at first he thought he was probably going to die, like you had said, depending on what side he was on. But at the time of that, I think it was who had found favor in God's eyes. And I believe Mary was found to have been in favor. God had found favor with her. You've been found righteous, whatever the right term may be. Maybe that's it. Who was the person that's found to be in favor of God's eyes?
But I think that Joseph would also be in favor of God's eyes. God knew how Joseph would approach Mary and handle the situation. So I think it's more, this is her body. This is.
Yeah, I think ultimately that's what it comes down to is that Mary's the one who's going to have the baby. And you could say, well, Elizabeth's going to have the baby too, but Zachariah is involved with that process and Joseph is not. And also going back to what I said about the contrast or comparison between men and women in Luke, he brings those two together really as a result of what God's doing. But certainly Gabriel comes to Mary because she's the one most heavily involved, I guess you could say, in what's going to happen, most intimately involved. Because even if Joseph does decide to divorce her, she still is going to have the baby, right?
I think she needed to hear it.
Me too.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say, if Joseph came to me and said, I was visited by an angel and you're gonna be pregnant, I don't know, I just think that, and the way that Mary received the message was amazing. I mean, her faith in God must have been really, really good because she didn't question it. She just said, let it be, as you have said.
And in God's plan exhibited through the Gospels here, Mary, this woman Mary is elevated, which was not normal in that culture. She has been visited by an angel. That makes her super important. All right, let's see what he says. We're going to get into some of the words that some of you have used here. Talking about her being favored. Coming in. Now, I saw the word in. I had an immediate question. You have a question?
Where's out?
In what?
Yeah, where's out? Yeah.
The house, the room.
Must have been the house, right? Or maybe, in all the movies and stuff, you see, she has her own special bedroom, whatever, and the shining light comes through the window. Probably not quite like that, but came into where she was, her house. We don't even know, well, all the movies pictured at night, we don't really know. It doesn't tell us what time of day it was. She might have been sitting there selling or something. We don't really know. But the important thing is he came into her, he came to her. She didn't go to where he was and said to her, "Greetings, favored one. The Lord is with you," or "the Lord be with you." Now, this word greetings is a word that's used in greeting people, and literally it means be full of joy. Which, it's kind of, I kind of wish that maybe it had been translated that way. It maybe would mean a little more to us. Gabriel appears and says, "Be full of joy." Okay, well, that's a little bit better than saying, "Hi, how you doing?" Which is how we think of greetings, right? Let's look at a couple of places in the Old Testament where this kind of wording is used. First of all, the messianic passage of Zechariah 9:9. Let's have a couple people look up different passages. So who will take Zechariah 9:9? Okay, and Lamentations 4:21-22. Lamentations. Okay, you got the verses? Zephaniah. Try to find Zephaniah. All right, Zephaniah 3:14-20.
3:14.
And Joel. Right before Amos. All right, Joel 2:21-27.
We try to find it. He's finding it on his phone. So it's easier.
What?
He's finding it on his phone. It's not hard.
Oh, if you have a phone, it's easier.
Yeah.
All right, let's start with Zechariah 9:9. And some of this will sound familiar to you, maybe all of it. Nice and loud.
Rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout aloud, O daughter of Jerusalem. Behold, your king is coming to you, righteous and having salvation is he, humble and mounted on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey.
All right, so when Mary hears greetings, it's the same wording that's used in Zechariah 9:9, rejoice greatly. Now, whenever we hear a phrase that we know from someplace else, it takes our mind to that someplace else. For example, continually, when I'm thinking about the topic of today and looking at Mary, a song keeps coming into my head that has nothing to do with it.
Jeremiah was a bullfrog.
There's no Jeremiah here, John.
Where did that come from?
It's because you think about that song all the time. Mother Mary, come to me, speaking words of wisdom.
Let it be.
No, it has nothing, but Mother Mary. So when Mary hears, well, my point is, when Mary hears these words, does she know Old Testament scripture? Yeah, we know that by what she says later. And so I think it's got to take her mind back to that prophecy, Zechariah 9:9. Okay, let's hear Lamentations 4:21-22.
Rejoice and be glad, O daughter of Edom, you who dwell in the land of Uz. But to you also the cup shall pass, you shall become drunk and strip yourself bare. The punishment of your iniquity, O daughter of Zion, is accomplished. He will keep you in exile no longer, but your iniquity, O daughter of Edom, he will punish, he will uncover your sins.
All right, so that one's not such great, doesn't sound like such great news, but it does use the words rejoice greatly. So this is a somewhat common expression. Okay, where are we? Zephaniah 3:14-20.
Sing aloud, O daughter of Zion. Shout, O Israel. Rejoice and exult with all your heart, O daughter of Jerusalem. The Lord has taken away the judgments against you. He has cleared away your enemies. The King of Israel, the Lord, is in your midst. You shall never again fear evil. On that day it shall be said to Jerusalem, fear not, O Zion. Let not your hands grow weak. The Lord your God is in your midst, a mighty one who will save. He will rejoice over you with gladness. He will quiet you by his love. He will exalt over you with loud singing. I will gather those for you who mourn for the festival, so that you will no longer suffer reproach. Behold, at the time I will deal with all your oppressors, and I will save the lame and gather the outcast, and I will change their shame into praise and renown in all the earth. At that time I will bring you in, at that time when I gather you together, for I will make you renowned and praised among all the peoples of the earth, when I restore your fortunes before your eyes, says the Lord.
Did you catch all the references to the Messiah being there? I mean, there's too many for me to go back over again, but that passage is replete with references to the coming of the King, who would be in their midst. I remember that expression in there. Certainly Mary was familiar with that as well. Okay, Joel 2:21-27.
Don't be afraid, my people, be glad now and rejoice. The Lord has done great things. Don't be afraid, you animals of the field, for the wilderness pastures will soon be green. The trees will be filled with fruit, fig trees and grapevines will be loaded down once more. Rejoice, you people of Israel, rejoice in the Lord your God. The rain he sends demonstrates his faithfulness. Once more, the autumn rain will come, as well as the rains in the spring. The threshing floors will again be piled high with grain, and the presses will overflow with new wine to the overflow. The Lord says, I will give you back what you lost to the swarming locust and hopping locust, stripping locust and a cutting locust. It was I who sent a great destroying army against you. Once again, you will have all the food you want, and you will praise the Lord your God, who does these miracles for you. Never again will my people be disgraced. Then you will know that I am among the people of Israel. I am the Lord your God, and there is no other. Never again will my people be disgraced.
Again, you can see the messianic implications of that. And earlier in Joel chapter 2 was quoted by Peter on the day of Pentecost, which was a prediction of what would happen there. All right, so my point is that Mary was familiar with these passages, and most of them deal with coming of Messiah. So when she hears those words, I think it probably took her back to that. Now, let's talk as quickly as we can about what he calls her favored one. I think the expression was used several times in our discussion earlier, that she found favor with the Lord. And I want to make sure that we're careful to not misunderstand that expression even, because often we can think of it in terms that Mary did something to deserve God's grace to her. She found it. I think back to that evangelistic campaign back in the mid-70s. I don't know if any of you were involved in that, the I Found It campaign. Yeah, I was on the phone calling people from a phone bank, asking them if they saw the billboards. I found it. And wouldn't you like to find it too? And I found it, as if I'm searching for God and I found him, but God was never lost, was he? He found me. And the same thing, we got to make sure we understand the same thing concerning Mary or Zechariah or anyone who is a recipient of God's grace. It's that God found them. So when we say she found grace, that might lead us to the wrong impression. It might be better for us to say grace found her. God found her. Favored one. She's the one who is endowed with grace. Henry Morris points out this is actually the first mention of grace in the New Testament. The first mention of grace in the Old Testament is Genesis 6:8. Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. In both cases, a human believer was selected by God's grace to bring a new beginning into the world. Noah brought the post-flood economy that would follow the judgment of the flood on the sin of the world. Mary brought forth the Savior who, through the judgment of the cross, would carry away the sin of the world. Interesting connection there that Henry Morris makes. Now, some of you, how many of you grew up Roman Catholic? Okay, I knew there'd be a few because this area is so heavily Roman Catholic. And if you didn't grow up Roman Catholic, you certainly know people who are. And a large piece of the Roman Catholic expression of faith is the Hail Mary, which comes from this passage. The Hail Mary prayer. The Vulgate, that is the Latin translation, translates it gratiae plena, which means full of grace. And that's correct. If by full of grace, we mean full of grace that she received. It's wrong if it means full of grace which she is to bestow. You understand the difference? Was that clear? John MacArthur comments on the non-biblical teaching concerning Mary. Our time is getting away from us, so I think I'll save that for next week, because I have some quotes from different popes and things about Mary. And you might say, oh, what do we need to do that for? Well, it's because we deal with people who are Roman Catholics, and we need to know what it is that their church teaches, and probably know more than what they do. That's my experience with people in almost any religion, that they don't know much about what their church really teaches. And so the more we know, the more we're able to talk with them. So if you have some Roman Catholic friends, invite them next week to hear about the Hail Mary prayer. Yes.
Bill, can you give me the passages that were read today? Zechariah 9:9.
Yeah, the one, let's see, Lamentations 4:21 and 22.
I'm sorry, what was it?
Lamentations 4:21 to 22. Zephaniah 3:14 to 20. And Joel 2:21 to 27.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Well, I'm gonna speak for the Horton boys. I think they're interested in this buying of the wife. I mean, when they go in, take a 20 and say, I'll take 2 chickens, a cow and Jody.
I'm certainly interested in the price.
Yeah.
From the.
And remember that the girls had no choice in this. Like a Hallmark, not a Hallmark movie by any means. All right, no more questions, we'll be dismissed.
Someone over Jeremiah with a bullfrog, like that just came out of his head.
I didn't want to answer that,
You
so
know, I think
I wasn't a Baptist in those days.
Well, when we were at Cedarville, Dr. Jeremiah was the president, and that was popular when we were in college. So, yeah.
I just want to get really animated with it. I thought, hey, you're on to something.
You don't think Mary was 12 though? She was like 15.
I don't know any reason why she couldn't have been 12.
Everybody